All right, so let's dive right in. The first thing we'll look at are liquidity fees, which, as you guys all know, are the most important metric for the network. We've seen since the beginning of the year, first quarter on the left, we've seen a significant uptick in overall liquidity fees. But the most notable is that as of this last quarter, on the right side, you can see the green line represents the change in liquidity fees after the 15 bips minimum on swaps were enabled. So we're ending out the total yearly, or sorry, the first 3 quarters of income, we're ending out at 20.34 million. And if we had not enacted that change, we would have only been at around $16.1 million. So that was a change that, despite the drop in swap volume over the last quarter, we've actually seen an uptick in the income of the network overall, which is what we want to be seeing. So that was a great experiment. It just proved to us that we've been undercharging for swaps, with some swaps seeing as little as 3 basis points in fees to complete. So we moved ours up to closer with what the industry standard is, and now nodes and LPs are enjoying a lot more income as a result. So total liquidity is up 12% from 259 million to 289 million. We've seen the liquidity fees collected up 21% in the last quarter, again, as a result of changing the minimum bips on swaps. Affiliate earnings are down 18%, probably as a result of the overall swap volume cooling off over the last quarter. And the amount, the breakdown of system income as a proportion of liquidity to block rewards is up. So we're trending closer and closer to that 50-50 mark, after which, once liquidity fees are greater than block rewards, it represents true sustainability of the network. So we're trending 11% higher towards that goal. We also landed the new integrations from OKX, Zengo, and Li-Fi, with many more coming soon. Just taking a look at what was accomplished and the decisions that were made this quarter, we completed Rune Pool, a hard fork that included Taproot support. We landed ADRs 15, 17, and 18, as well as patching multiple vulnerability disclosures. We made the decision to begin deleveraging the base layer as part of making way for moving to app layer, which we'll cover shortly. That entailed disabling swaps to synths, pausing new loans, which was passed by a governance vote from the nodes, reducing max synth utilization, which is now proposed, which should achieve in deleveraging the synths so that dual LPs start to earn more rewards, and to begin winding down THORFi. And the reason that we're doing that is because we're transitioning all of the financial experimentation and rapid iteration will now take place on app layer, leaving the base layer to just focus on what it does best, which is facilitating movement of cross-chain L1s. So in this time, just in the last quarter, I mean, the idea for this only came about, I think, at the beginning of August. And in that time, JP has gone out and onboarded 2 different teams, so Strangelove and Ruji, and to basically provide all of the infrastructure that's needed in order to execute on the app layer vision. So we've been really happy to work with these 2 teams, and we'll get into kind of how that collaboration is going next. But the ultimate end goal of the app layer is to bring the order books, perps, money markets, a launchpad, and a full suite of DeFi apps onto THORChain. In terms of network health, I'm sure you guys can remember, but this year has been punctuated by numerous great scaling and growth issues, especially when we did experience the mini bull in the last quarter. There was just a ton of trade volume, and we were seeing a lot of stuck outbounds, signing failures. There's just been a lot of bugs squashed this year as well. So I think that this is really the first quarter in history where we have pretty much had completely smooth operations, no P0s, no extended pauses of churns or of trading on any network, any one network. And really, that's been just a massive effort of the Nine Realms team, as well as Multipartite, just to give them a shout out, like just relentlessly identifying and squashing bugs in the vault accounting logic and churning logic and everything that just makes THORChain run smoothly. The only thing I would also just call out too is that Gaia on the Cosmos Hub continues to be a bit of a pain with their rapid, unscheduled, or rather, yeah, the upgrades have just been a little bit difficult to keep on top of, as we saw yesterday. But other than that, we're achieving a level of operational excellence that we haven't, had before. So I'm really proud of the team for getting us there, and obviously we're trending in the right direction on that, and that's always been our one of our most important metrics. In terms of GitLab stats, man, 57 issues opened. You can thank JP Thor for that. There's a lot of stuff on his wish list coming down the pipe right now, and I'm really excited to talk about some of those things in a bit. But of those 57 open, we only closed 24 because there was a lot of issues that were just coming about, basically roadmap scoping for the next decade out. So just a ton of stuff landing now, but also a ton of things, a ton of ideas being deliberated. And I think it's really important to get everyone here thinking about those things, because although that's the only real signal that we have in the community is you guys and your feedback on these ideas. So I would encourage everyone to get on GitLab if you're not already, and get in these issues, read through the descriptions thoroughly, and leave your comments and leave your criticisms. 128 merge requests open, 94 closed, so good burn rate on those. You can see an even distribution of the priority of merge requests, and notably there were no P0s in Q3, so I think that's the first time ever. We've always harped on stability, and I feel like we've achieved it, so it's really a good thing. Notably on this, you'll be able to see that the hard fork was the majority of the work that went into the last quarter. Rune Pool was also a really, really big effort as well. Before we jump into the new teams and everything, I just wanted to say a word about protocol and operational security. Some of you guys may have seen the story from yesterday, but basically, anytime you're bringing people on board, whether it's new teams or new devs, it presents a risk. And so JP and myself and the Nine Realms team have been working to integrate new devs and cultures into the THORChain ecosystem, so that we can safely land basically the biggest changes that we're making to the TC architecture since its inception. So just word of caution, we always need to keep our guard up and make sure that we deliver this stuff fast, but also safely. So we're ever trying to balance the trade-off between velocity of execution and security. So let's jump in and talk about some of these new teams. The first to show up was Strangelove. So we started working them actually a little bit before the beginning of Q3. And really their mandate was to basically bring us up to speed with the latest and greatest in the Cosmos. They're a great team. I'm sure you all know them. They're a household name in Cosmos. We've got Jack, Andrew, Steven, Vivek, and Kyle working on THORChain now, almost full time. I mean, it's awesome how they've showed up. And we've also onboarded the Rujira Alliance, which consists of Hans, Brett, Pragmatic Monkey, Mark, and Jquant. And of course, on both teams, there's plenty of people behind the scenes, but these are some of the main, cast of characters that we've just had to bring on board and work with regularly over the last 3 months. So, we've basically tripled the size of the THORChain team, and it's awesome to see, because now we have more than just Nine Realms, sort of running the show. We have a diverse set of teams in the THORChain ecosystem, all working on different areas, but we've achieved a level of synergy that I think we all agree is just so good. Like, Nine Realms can just focus on this base layer, which is the node and LP experience, as well as chain integrations. And Strangelove can work on all of the Cosmos specific things, like the X upgrade path, which allows us to do hard forks a lot easier, which will also really help our node launcher suite. They're also doing, a bunch of the prerequisite stuff that leads into what the Ruggiero Alliance is working on, which Hans, I know you're here in the audience. Did you just want to give a little bit of detail just about some of the work that you're doing and how you're building on the capabilities that Strangelove are going to provide on the COSM-WASM front?
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. I'll start off. I mean, I can just echo what you've already said. It's super exciting to have all these teams coming together and building on top of the THORChain, the kind of base layer. But yeah, the things that we're focused on is enabling CosmWasm developers and smart contracts to access and integrate with all the liquidity and the layer one integration. So part of that is tokenizing deposits from layer ones so that they become Cosmos FTK bank tokens, and they can be transferred between contracts and borrowed against and traded on the app layer. Equally with tokenizing LP deposits, so that we can do clever things with yield farming, and then integrate all of that into IBC as well, so that these assets can be exported and integrated across the entire IBC ecosystem. So yeah, still pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's awesome. It feels like we're all super coordinated. Everyone knows what they need to do, and it all funnels perfectly into each other. So let's take a look at how that's happening. Basically, what we've done is we've figured out the path dependencies that are required to deliver the app layer. So on basically what it all starts with is being able to more effectively upgrade THORChain's basically core app layer. Or core application, or its utilization of the Cosmos SDK. So the Strangelove team came in. They're basically building out this new upgrade pathway, which will allow validators to vote on a new binary and then basically have that automatically take effect, so that we don't see any of the hiccups of hard forks like we have in the past. And then Steven from the Strangelove team is going to get the Cosmos V50 upgrade, which enables COSM-WASM capability and IBC capability. And Kyle from their team is going to work on the native message send, which allows us to essentially use the standard Cosmos message send, so that integrators don't have to muck around with the custom types or even use message deposit. They can just do a message send with a memo, and it will work the same as a deposit. So that's going to be really key in just the overall, moving things to app layer and making things more interoperable, and will also help with getting IBC support. So those three things have to sort of land, and then those are already all in progress. And then Hans has been working on bridge assets, which are basically replacing trade assets as a way to both arb the network, but also they'll be the basis for all of the assets that are used at the app layer. So more detail about that soon. You can also go check out the Ruggiero docs. They just launched their docs, and so it gives a bit more of a technical outline of what that is there. And one of the things that like the Rugi team is really going to be doing is trying to figure out like the contract auth policy and figure out what an actual app looks like on THORChain. What are the primitives that they need to expose? How can they call into the base layer? Can we take the LP units, like Hans was just mentioning too, and then tokenize them and expose that to the app layer? So a lot of the actual core functionality and bindings into the base layer are being built out now by Hans. So as you can see, really, it's a massive group effort to get all of these things together. But this is how the app layer is shaping up. And again, I'll just emphasize that like less than 2 months ago, we had no real clue. I mean, we just were like, okay, how are we gonna do? Like, we know we want to bring COSM-WASM and smart contracting onto THORChain in order to basically give developers access to the deep native L1 liquidity pools, Bitcoin. I mean, we know that that's going to be an area in the future that there's a ton of demand for. So we needed to get this team together now in order to make it happen. And so I'm just really happy with how the timing worked out, and everyone's just kind of like jiving together, and the development is great. And all the PRs for all of this stuff are already open. And so now it's just like a matter of going through and reviewing it and making sure that like everyone reviews everyone else's work. And so that does, like, it does increase just the time and the amount of eyes that you want on this stuff, but it's overall better than, when we were just shipping with like 2 or 3 devs and so it's just awesome to see the team grow and for all of these new capabilities to come online. And then at the base layer, I think one of the most important things that we'll be working on is just like the general quality of life for LPs, and for integrators and swappers. And so just really focusing in on what base layer does best, which is pooling L1 liquidity and swapping it. So that includes multiple affiliates, which I'm sure some of the integrators in the audience will be happy to learn. Will be landing this in this release. For later releases, but actively slated, are the Router v5 and the Active Yield product. A lot of ongoing debate about how that's going to work. Active Yield's a really interesting one. Like you don't want to make it too easy for people to basically like stream out of the Rune asset, because then it just results in constant sell pressure. That's a piece of feedback that we've heard. But on the other hand, we want to make it as easy as possible. We want to give people the primitives to be able to stream their yield directly out of an LP position into USDC, for example. Like that would be an excellent user experience. So we have to take into account all of these things, and that issue is actively being scoped. And I think that one is the one where the community feedback would be most helpful, is on just active LP and just LP enhancements in general. JP, I saw you just joined from the audience. Do you want to say a word about those things?
Yeah, 100%. So 3 years ago, Chad and I spent a lot of time talking about would we let people break up those swaps in small amounts. And we always thought, no, the impatient people must pay the patient people, let them pay high fees. But over the 3 years of single chain KSNet, main multi-chain KSNet, we saw the huge amount of friction people had with, they're extremely price execution sensitive. And like 18 months ago, we decided to implement streaming swaps. And obviously that changed the game because we revisited that. So I'm extremely hopeful that it could be as simple as the user experience upgrade of streaming yield to LPs, or allowing them to separate yield from principal to not have it swallowed up in impermanent loss. Is a small tweak like that the night and day improvement into attracting more dual LPs? Because the THORChain can only make money on exogenous assets. It only makes money on the Bitcoin and ETH in its liquidity pools. It does not make money on Rune in its pools. It does not make money on Rune in its bond. It does make money on Rune in the liquidity pools, but only if they are paired with the L1 assets. So the limiting factor of THORChain's profitability and its ability to pay for security, pay for nodes, pay for the node operators, pay for the hardware, pay for arbitrage, pay for everything, is how much TVL it contains, measured in exogenous assets like Bitcoin and ETH and stables. So the last 3 years, Chad and I rolled out a whole bunch of features and really pulled the string on trying to address the user experience around providing liquidity with savers, POL, Rune Pool. Even lending was an attempt to drive up TVL through absorbing exogenous collateral into the Rune asset itself. And now that we've kind of opened our eyes up to the app layer, we're going to rely on Hans and the Ruji team to implement more exotic, more risky, more high leverage features that can just have a faster go-to market on the app layer. And we can just go back to tackling dual LP user experience, but on a different angle this time. This time, instead of saying, hey, let's create 2 classes of LPs, or 3 classes. One is savers, which is like low risk, low yield, and dual LPs, and leverage up the LPs. Instead, we're going to go back and say, hey, what if we just put everything down and try to just really solve the user experience of dual LPs by addressing everything, give them everything that they want, but in a new way. So the first, obviously, in my opinion, is separating yield from principal. Right now, our liquidity providers have two numbers in their head. They've got the original deposit value, which they deposited like 1,000 days ago, and they got the current deposit value, which is what they would pull out right now. And so we only let them compare those two numbers. So of course they're going to compare the performance of those two numbers against the hypothetical scenario is, what if I didn't LP? This kind of like HODL versus LP. And then we do something even crazy, and we like extend it out to the annual and do this HODL versus LP APY. And in part, I'm partly to blame, and the THORChain team are partly to blame on that, because we at one stage we had impermanent loss protection, and we kind of wanted to beat impermanent loss, but at that time we weren't making enough yield. So anyway, I'm quite confident that making two user experience changes. One is separate the yield from the principal, so it doesn't get swallowed up by IL and taken out by simple leverage and et cetera, and then allowing users who opt into it to stream it out to USDC or Bitcoin or ETH to take advantage of THORChain's new yield module and pay a fee for it. Like, and 10 bits is way too low. It should be like 100 bits for the convenience of delivering to someone their yield on a silver platter. What if that is enough to 2x, 3x, 5x THORChain's TVL, because we open up to a much wider group of people? And then at the same time, if you think everything's risk versus reward. So if we're able to 2-3x THORChain's TVL for LP, but it's much lower risk because it's not high leverage from like lending or savings or a POL, and it's not complex. So we do have a chance of ossifying at the base layer, focusing on just the dual LP and streaming swaps and chain integrations. And then the Rugi team, and led by Hans and whatnot, can build out more of the exotic DeFi suite. And it doesn't matter if like one DeFi app blows up, it's not going to risk the base layer, because the base layer is providing critical infrastructure to a whole bunch of wallets that we know and love, and soon more. And those wallets, those users are not going to use lending or savings or whatever. They just want swaps. And those swaps will pay the fees, and the fees will pay the security and the liquidity of the network. So bit of a scenic tour of the problem and our solutions. And so 2025 is going to be literally about delivering the app layer, handing over the DeFi suite to Hans and the team, and then Pluto and I and the team and Nine Rails will just focus purely on streamers, dual LP, and chains next year. And then actually make an attempt this time over the next 3 years at just like locking up the code base, making it best in class base layer code base, rock solid L1 swaps, very low tail risk of any further entropy around nuances of like chain halts and bugs and stuff like that. So just like stamp it out to almost zero. Have active security monitoring to like really address the long tail risk of just permutations of high entropy blockchains. And then that's what we do for the next 3 years. So any questions on that?
Yeah, no, that's a great summary, and I love the way you said it yesterday. We want to do for LPs what streaming did for swaps. I think that's yeah. So yeah, that's on the active yield side. There's gonna we'll go through your wish list right after this slide. Maybe we can jump through some of those other enhancements. But let's just make it through the rest of these. So we got some incentive pendulum fixes coming down the pipe as well. Those have been rigorously discussed and debated. But really the idea is to give back control to the nodes over whether we need to over-index for just like the bonding to liquidity ratio. We're going to be landing base imminently. That's undergoing testing now. And then Dennis and I will turn our attention to EDDSA and Solana. Once we have EDDSA support, we also have another community member working on THORChain. So that's kind of like the Q4 base layer roadmap. And then there's all this stuff too. But, and JP, I don't know if we want to go through them one by one, but basically all of this stuff, again, just serves to meet the needs and the quality of life of LPs and nodes. So I'll encourage everyone to go through these issues one by one. Again, jump into the issue, get involved, and we can make threads in Discord for each one of these. But yeah.
Yeah, basically, like a couple of features is like being able to move LPs without full withdrawals and adding again. So that like that's important, like, especially like a lot of people in DME and going, they're trying to move from Ledger to Multisig for the LP or node positions. And myself, I've been moving a bunch of nodes from Ledger to Multisig, and it's painful because you got to like turn out the node and move back in. But the quality of life improvement to LPs and nodes, but also streaming in ads, asymmetrical adds and removes, I think is important. Should have been done from the start actually. So I'm working with multipartite on that. Separating yield from principal, yield streaming, but also we've got on the streaming sides things like price conditional streamers. Opposite streamers consume each other for faster execution, and all swaps should be streaming actually. One less integration hurdle for wallets, and we still have been bouncing around memless transactions. I think there's an easy win there to just merge that and deliver memless, and see what pops up into the community. And I think that's it for the base layer.
Yeah, and it'll be really interesting too once like order books go live on the app layer, and how we can kind of use like some sort of basically do fulfill the vision of instant swaps. I know some people were really excited about that because when we were talking about launching order books on the base layer, which Chad had already opened the PR for, and it was actually already merged. It was ready to go, but we just never moved forward with it, for a couple of reasons. But the idea is that you could combine the AMM with the order book liquidity and just get a better order with better and faster execution and better price execution for the end user. So we're still working towards that goal, but the way that we're going to do it is through a combination of best-in-class streaming on the base layer and then also the order book liquidity on the app layer. But all that will kind of get packaged up and aggregated together once the app layer lands. Because we're laser focusing on the app layer and just landing that this quarter, there have been some deprioritizations. First of all, the Savers POL match is not immediately needed due to basically deleveraging synths and pausing the manual synth. Also, we're at the POL cap right now, and nodes have more or less signaled that they don't want more POL deployed into the network right now. So basically, there's no point in landing this unless we were going to increase the maximum POL deposit anyway. The affiliate rev share that did pass, and we started to implement it. But we've just been looking at the swap pricing, and we're pretty neck and neck with Maya and Chainflip right now, especially after the increase to 15 min bips, which is 30 min bips on a double swap. So like BTC to ETH, for example, is paying 30 bips minimum liquidity fee. So in order to stay competitive, I think that we just need to, observe the effects of the incentive pendulum shift, observe the effects of increased fees, of the system income rune burn and the dev fund, and revisit this next quarter. And it's one of those things where it's like, yes, the governance for this has already passed, but we're hoping that the node operator community understands where we're coming from and agrees that the more important priority right now is to focus on app layer. And just let the current economic governance things, basically they all piled up because we were working on the hard fork, and so we had like 4 ADRs to implement after the hard fork, and it just doesn't make sense to make like 4 major economic changes at once. So I think that's why we want to table ADR 16 for now. The auto bond, ADR 19, again, that would have been, I think there would be infinite demand for a product like that because it's a frictionless rune on rune product that doesn't really have downside in the same way that Rune Pool does. So there would be infinite demand for that project, and people would just ape into it, even if they were earning irrational APYs. And we're already significantly over bonded, and all that would do is shift the incentive pendulum further away from nodes. So let's just see what how things land with the current incentive pendulum shift back towards LPs. That should boost things enough, as well as deleveraging synths. Like, I think that's going to be enough to basically make LPing a really sweet deal again. And then that should, to start tipping the scales back in the direction of liquidity. Also, onboarding app layer assets is going to increase the amount of rune that's needing to be bonded, so we can revisit ADR 19 when we are a little less over bonded. Also, there was talk about rolling back bond scaled rewards. And that's, it's part of the incentive pendulum discussion. It's part of, the node quality of life discussion. But when we pitch this, some of the nodes signal that they're like opposed or not ready to consider this. It would require like a pretty significant retooling. We probably also want to be able to look at this once we're ready to go upwards of 200 validators or more. But again, I think it's something we should land the app layer first. Once that's all landed, we'll switch Strangelove's focus to basically scaling out like the consensus mechanism. There's new research on better alternatives to Tendermint, so we can try to push block times. We can try to get them down to like 3 seconds. There's a ton of things that we can do on just like the performance and modernization side that we can do to allow the network to scale more, and then maybe we can talk about scaling, getting rid of bond scaled rewards. But again, I think it's just too soon to consider that. And then the trade fees, ADR 20, basically that's like preferential pricing for people who, or wallets that like move a lot of bridge assets volume. That ADR was initially authored for trade assets, so only applicable to ARBs. But now that we're phasing out trade assets and moving to bridge assets, I think it makes sense to table that one as well until after app layer lands. So all this whole like these last 2 months have just been like, how are we going to do this? What things do we need to reprioritize in order to really laser focus on app layer? And these were kind of the things that we landed on. But I think it's the right direction overall. So that just takes us to where are we at 2025 and beyond. JP already touched on this, but basically maximizing node and LP quality of life. Do for the LPs what streaming did for swaps and add as many changes as possible. That's what the Nine Realms team, myself, are all going to work on. And then on the app layer side, they're going to be delivering lending, money markets, yield products that are uncoupled from our teams for higher speed to market. And that's really important because we don't want to be the bottleneck of innovation. We want to let multiple teams show up to the party, and and how that's going to work. Basically, there's been a lot of questions I've seen in the community around why isn't this app layer permissionless? It will be permissionless, but we have to land it and we have to answer some of the different questions. If we tried to figure out the answers to all of them, it would die in committee before it ever saw the light of day. So our approach to this is basically work with a Ruji team, which is an independent team, hear out their use case, figure out, build those processes out and set expectations. What does an app actually look like on THORChain? How does it benefit THORChain? If we have all these different apps that are all doing the same thing in a completely permissionless environment, that just like fractures liquidity, attention, market share. I don't think that there's an actual use case, or not use case. I don't think that there's an actual valid argument for that being the best thing for THORChain. That might, be the thing that like gets everyone all excited, and permissionless is a meme, decentralization is a meme. We're here to do one thing, which is grow the TVL of THORChain and to make LPing and running nodes on the network profitable. I mean, those are the main metrics. And so how we get there is going to be a process and a journey. But we're going to observe the results of the early deployments of Ruji during Q1, and then in Q2 we'll go out to the market with a process to launch new apps. So teams will have to build their contracts, define a fee share, present that to the nodes and community, and get support. Some things might die at the get support level, and so it's important to have a discussion with the community. Show up if you're a builder and you want to build something on app layer. Show up, present your idea, and tell us how much of the fees that you're willing to give to THORChain, and then convince the node operators that's the right thing to do. If you can do that, then you can get onto the app layer. I promise you that right now. But it's not just going to be a free for all where everyone can just come and deploy any contract. At least not in the next few years. We want to roll this out, and we want to get this right, and we don't want to endanger the base layer, and so that we can make THORChain L1 native cross-chain infrastructure. And so yeah, that's the goal. Let's get it done.
Yeah, and I just want to add on that, like the Ruji apps, the vertical sections of DeFi, they're all there and they all have users. and we know exactly what's needed. So it's just a matter of taking the old Kujira contracts and building them on THORChain, hooking them into the base layer properly. So, and Hans and I have been grinding away at this for the last month. And like Pluto said, we didn't actually know how we were going to do it in July, as early as July, because we hadn't yet war gamed it out and worked it out. As it turns out, all these apps are going to call in via message deposit, which will flow through the way that they're currently handled. They'll flow through the pools, and then they'll pop out at the TX out, which we already support DEX aggregation and data piping. So DEX aggregation and data piping allows TX outs on THORChain to call back into the app layer again. So you can do like a swap and borrow, or a repay and swap outs, and all that flow will still go via the base layer. They will be swapping via L1 pools using bridge assets, and this has just taken us to build it out. And like I've seen since Uniswap v3 with BSU licenses and closed source and Solana, like the way that you let the major players or the first players set the culture, it's very sticky. And Solana DeFi is all closed source. Modern Ethereum DeFi is all business use licenses, which is just all like the culture just needs to be forked. And so the way we set the culture over the next 6 months, open source, audited, fee sharing, unified UX, etc. Like that's the culture that will stick into, and that's how we can get to orderly and permissionless. And at the same time, we've had to also think, and Hans and I were talking at length today about what's the governance process? How do meme flags work? Will the contract halt when THORChain global, etc., like to give the nodes like control of the app layer? Because the last thing you want is like a large app, accumulate 1 billion in TVL, and then suddenly like there's a giant hack, and then users lose hundreds of millions of dollars that all just floods out through Bitcoin and never be recovered again. And like that, it may not kill THORChain, but it may kill THORChain. Like that's significant. I myself have lived through crazy events on various DeFi apps, and a large hack will kill a DeFi protocol. And we've got the outbound throttle, and we've got governance. Code, like there's this idea that code is law. It's only also partially implemented either. But with THORChain, the nodes run governance, and whatever consensus they arrive to is the consensus of the state machine. And if there's a large hack and there's like 100 million Bitcoin about to walk out the door, I expect anyone to ask the node operator to make pause, and I expect a node operator to make pause and trap the hack funds before they walk out the door. And then I expect the whole community to work out what bug it was, store migrate in the fix, unwind that hack transaction, and put it all back and get going again. That is the correct way to respond. There is 100 decentralized nodes out there who are managing the state machine, controlling user funds, right? They only make money if that TVL is safe, secure, earning fees. And like that's how this whole system works. We don't need to watch $100 million go out the door because we were like, oh no, code is law. And instead, it's like, no, the nodes are securing the user funds. Whatever consensus they want to agree on is the consensus of the system. And so that's the stuff we can enforce and set that expectation into the app layer. But I've had a long chat with Hans about, can you make the app layer truly permissionless and a free-for-all? And I just don't think you can ever skip the layers of effective governance that we've got already. And blockchain is scarce, and we don't want just random apps get deployed, low-quality closed-source apps get deployed. And even we don't yet know the various attack paths that we're going to generate between the app layer and the base layer. And we want to kind of like partition off and make sure like apps aren't hooking into various like code paths and entry points that we haven't yet explicitly controlled because everything goes in by message deposit and everything comes out by TXR. So yeah. So Hans, do you want anything to add to this? You've been dealing with app layers, and you've seen your own events where you've had people just open up random channels and deploy random contracts. So what's your point of view on this?
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you here. Really, the way that nodes control the network and can have sort of immediate shut off of various elements is what's needed really. Being able to shut down a specific contract in response to something quickly, rather than having to rely on the ex-government 2-week vote or whatever, is critical for critical infrastructure like this. So we just need to make sure that all the right checks and balances are in place at all the different levels, so you can, potentially shut off the entire app layer in one go, or shut off a single contract, or anything between the two.
Totally. Awesome. So yeah, that's the plan. We're gonna make it all happen. And yeah, hopefully we're going to be able to get the app layer live in Q4. So that's what the whole team is swarming on. We've got 3, independent teams all working towards a common goal right now. Everyone is fully aligned, and we're all just super happy. I'm super happy about this. I acknowledge the path that we had to take to get here, and I acknowledge the experimentation that we've done on this protocol. But I'm really, really happy about this new direction that we're landing in. It's just extremely bullish in my opinion. So yeah, maybe we can take some questions really quickly, but that's it for the presentation. Thank you all for joining. I see just a couple I don't see many questions actually in the chat. So yeah, I guess this is a question of adding new chains and driving up costs and accepting RPCs. Yeah, it's one of the things that we're kind of trying to figure out right now with Base. It's actually difficult to spin up a Base daemon because we haven't been able to find a reliable snapshot server, and we just keep getting throttled. And so if we were to push that out to everyone, they might just end up getting throttled. So there's we can just direct everyone to an RPC, and as long as I'm just not worried about Eclipse attacks. I'm not worried about Base's official API Eclipse attacking THORChain. It just seems ridiculous. So I'm open to the idea of using RPCs, but I think what will happen is when we go to launch this, people will just be expected to enter in a URL rather than having the daemon spun up and automatically pointed at it for you. And you can decide, if you want which of 3 or 4 centralized services RPCs you want to use. You can spin up your own if you want. You can use the public one if you want. We'll just leave it up to the nodes to figure it out, and that just seems like the easiest way to get going on it. So we'll see how the rollout goes with Base and whether the nodes can get their shit together and actually figure out how to do that, because up until now it's just been super easy. You just run make install and a node gets set up for you and you don't have to think about anything. But now there's going to be actual you'd have to make a decision. You'll probably have to enter some sort of monthly contract with a block daemon or an anchor or some other service provider to provide you that RPC. But that still might be cheaper than running it yourself. It might be like Solana. Our Helios server was $40 a month for an unlimited RPC via Helios. So that's just a better value prop for node operators than running their own Solana daemons, at least until the Solana infrastructure becomes cheaper to run, which there are active efforts in that regard. So I think the situation is fluid. We can't just box ourselves into a corner with just being so rigid about requiring everyone to run their own daemon when, let's be honest, half these chains are centralized anyway. They have centralized sequencers or I'm not talking about Solana. I'm actually talking more about Base and the ETH-L2s. But as long as they have a centralized sequencer, I personally can't see any problem with using a centralized RPC. So we're just going to basically, use our intuition here and move safely, but it's not, that is nowhere near a level of concern for me as just the code we're about to land. So I think just use centralized RPCs for now and expand to non-centralized layer. And it's the same as THORChain's natural progression. Everyone started out on cloud operators. Everything was AWS at the beginning days. Now more than ever, we see bare metal because people are actually just realizing that it's cheaper to run and more effective to run bare metal than it is through a cloud provider. You'll save a ton of money if you do it. So the system is it's naturally going to trend to wherever it's most profitable. And also node operator margins will just naturally get driven down because there will be more competition. So I'm not worried about where people get their data from or how they do it. And it's just, it's a competitive landscape, and it's just going to go wherever the money is, the cheapest. Yes, for all chains or only L2s? Yeah, probably just for the L2s. And then Solana, it's going to be the same thing. We're going to partner with a couple of teams to provide nodes, and then we'll also just give node operators the ability to use either like a 9 realms cluster that automatically whitelists active validators, or some other stuff. Helios, they can use Anchor, Blockstream. Like, it'll basically just be up to you depending on what you want. So yeah. Not sure I see a question there. Cool.
A couple other things. So we also onboarded Hypernative. Hypernative will be doing transaction checking for us and assessing risk. The treasury will delegate a node, so they'll be able to make pause if they see something suspicious. But honestly, I think the culture that we've got with Protocol Guard and our own TX monitoring is best in class, and I'll be very, very interested to see if Hypernative can outperform our Protocol Guard channel. The culture there is just amazing to see people like flag transactions and just instantly call it out and like rabbit hole it and deep dive it. We've also signed with a company in Singapore called Silence Laboratories. This is on the Volta-Stick side. So we're using GG20, which is basically Binance TSS lib. But my concerns with GG20 is there has been a P0 issue 2 years ago in the library. Some known issues, obviously patched, but it is now a 4-year-old library that's been there is like much better state-of-the-art MPC, threshold ECDSA, more robust, and feature parity. And for Volta-Stick, it makes total sense because users who may not like waiting 6 seconds to sign a threshold ECDSA transactions and would much prefer to sign it in half a second. Although THORChain, like 6 seconds or 1 second signing is not much of a differentiator. Although the current GG20 MPC protocol, it requires 7 rounds of signing between 14 nodes or 14, 15 nodes. Whereas the modern state-of-the-art DKLS 23, which we're moving to, is only 3 rounds. So 7 rounds to 3 rounds is a massive improvement in network topology and just network cost. And so it should improve TSS reliability. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll out, we're basically paying them to open source the library, get feature parity with the Binance TSS lib. It's called DKLS 23. So actually there's a website, dkls.info. Check it out. You can read it. This modern state-of-the-art protocol, ordered by Trilobits, actually used by Coinbase Custody, Copper Custody, and I think the whole world is going to move to DKLS 23. And so yeah, we're paying them to open source it, achieve feature parity with Binance TSS lib. We will upgrade Volta-Stick first, and so we'll get to play with it first. And there's an upgrade path to go from GG20 to DKLS. And then when we're super comfortable with it, we will try and swap it out on StageNet. And the good thing about THORChain is it discards its vaults. It doesn't reshare its vaults. So we can actually upgrade just like 1 vault out of the 6 and like slowly move from GG20 to we're gonna call it OpenTSL, Open Threshold Signature Library. So from GG20 to OpenTSL, or Binance TSS lib to OpenTSL. So that's MPC and Hypernative. Yeah, I think anything else, Pluto, in the news front? Although that's it. Yeah.
Anything we're missing?
No, I mean, the other thing that we talked about just a little bit, but didn't really emphasize as much, is de-risking the base layer, winding down synths as part of making the LP experience better. That's definitely something that a lot of LPs have been mentioning over the past number of months and years. So the efforts to wind down THORFi lending and also to drive down the synth utilization is directly part of that effort to make LPing better on THORChain. So that's all combined with active yield, but just to part of the effort to deleverage the dual liquidity experience and drive more yield into LPs and really grow TVL through that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's been especially with THORChain, it's been obviously like kind of it's been just one grand experiment. And it's like we had to go through that in order to learn from those, learn from it and figure out really what the optimal next step is. And I think that's app layer. And it's moving all of the financial experimentation to the app layer so that we can continue to, no matter what happens, THORChain can continue to be the leader in native cross-chain swaps.
Yeah, and if you think about where THORChain came, so in 2018, this is like Atom Hub came out in February 2019. So we started building on Cosmos before even Atom had launched, right? Before the very first network. So there wasn't any IBC or Cosm around back in those days. And even IBC V1 came out, we just like refused to implement it because there was just no expressivity. There was like bugs on it. There were lots of issues. So we like 3 years ago or 2 years ago when we actually took a look at it and we said, there's no way we can implement IBC. It's just doesn't match our risk profile. And we were still trying to stabilize THORChain anyway and get to mainnet and whatnot. So we just kind of had to blow it all off. And then I was watching Wasm. It came up a few times the last few years, Chad and I, and Andrea was like, are we adding Cosm, Wasm? I was watching Terra. Terra is obviously the first biggest Cosm Wasm chain. But at the time we were still focusing on stability and rolling out what we needed to do. And we thought, hey, if you can implement it in a Cosm contract, why can't we just ship it on the base layer? And like those days we could ship a lot faster because we're less at stake. But as we onboarded TVL and more chains, things just necessarily slowed down. So I guess it got to mid-year and the chain had reached stability and we were looking around for the next big thing. We knew we had to upgrade the state machine to best in class because we were staring down a hard fork. I think, Pluto, if you remember, we wanted to do a hard fork like a year ago, but we just never had the bandwidth because we just had to we had a massive Dogecoin issue in February this year and we hadn't yet hit stability. So finally we're like, okay, let's hard fork, finally upgrade it. And then the question was, well, do we hard fork to the one with IBC and Cosm? And like we were bouncing around like, oh, we're not yet ready to consider it. And then obviously Kujira came onto the scene and we were like, fuck it, let's just go for it. And that's where we're at today. So it's all, like Pluto says, it's all an experiment. And I've got no regrets because THORChain is here today because it's the grand total of all the state transitions since 6 years ago. And those state transitions have won. Like in a field of like permutations of what could have happened and realities that could have happened, like you gotta we did well. We did all right. And we're winning. Like we're absolutely winning.
Yeah. I'm really proud of where we've come from and how far we've gotten, and just to have joined this team, to see all of it from the beginning. And it's just so awesome also to be bringing new teams on board as well. Like we couldn't be doing this without Strangelove and without the Ruji folks. So it was almost like a divine, timing, just all worked out. Everything clicked. Everyone, the ecosystem was in the right place to where, Kuji we basically just acqui-hired one of the best teams in DeFi. And, Strangelove was looking for their next thing. And so they had the bandwidth. And, at the base layer, we were just, Nine Realms was ready, and THORSec was ready to actually consider landing this stuff because of, this last quarter's worth of stability. And so again, we talked about this at the beginning of the year. I showed you guys the stats, we're up in every category on terms of, operational excellence. So now is the time to be leaning back into the innovation side and to really double down on what's possible for the next decade plus. Cool. That seems like a good place to wrap it. Thanks everyone for joining. You can continue to leave comments in general and we'll go through them. But yeah, just really appreciate everyone's support and, hope everyone understands why we had to deprioritize certain things. But I hope we laid out the case today for why we're doing that. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Pluto. See you, Tyler. See you, Hans. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.